Alright guys, welcome back to Old Idiot Fishing. Tonight I think we're going to take a look at kind of an old classic that a lot of us probably grew up on, and take a look at some of the ways that it's probably changed since the last time you were playing around with them. Tonight we're going to be talking about bobbers. I mean, these are about as classic as it gets when we talk about fishing. I know a lot of us probably started out in the old trout ponds or some of the panfish areas, sitting on the shore, throwing a line out with a little bit of a split shot weight on it, a simple hook, probably a worm, a grub, a piece of corn, whatever. That goes back to probably some of the earliest days of line and rod type fishing, right? We throw it out, wait for the bobber to sink. When we sink, set that hook, reel our catch in. That's awesome. Those types of bobbers are what we call like a static bobber, right? These attach to the line in some fashion, like your typical ball bobber. You know, you wrap the line on the bottom, flip it over, wrap, push that in, wrap the top so it stays in line as you're casting. Or we've got those, casting bobbers, as torpedo style bobbers. Some of them have weight on the end, whatever the case, but it's still some kind of an attachment, either a sleeve or a spring. Wrap the line around, let that capture go over, and then sail them out there. But there's another type of bobber that gives us a much more dynamic range when we're talking about fishing. Hitting different depths, hitting different species, all sorts of stuff, and that is the slip bobber. So this one, it's like your regular casting torpedo style bobber, just like this, except there's a hole bored all the way through that stick that I can run the line through. And this allows me to adjust my depth as I need it for what I'm going after and the depths that they're in. This one I used quite a bit, actually, chasing salmon up in the Ellensburg Canyon. I was able to change depths, for the dynamic conditions in the river that we were fishing in. Coupled it with just a little egg sinker down at the bottom, kind of towards where I had my shrimp hooked onto that hook, and then I could cast out, let it float, and that egg sinker would keep that shrimp just about bouncing around on the bottom, kind of where those salmon were trolling through. And then when they'd hit, the bobber would go down, set the hook, reel them in, right? But they also work really good for bass, walleye, panfish, anything that you're kind of targeting. We can use these to go after those different fish in those different depths. And we can kind of use it, I don't know, for some of you guys out there with the forward-facing live sonar stuff, you can see where these fish are at and throw a line out with that bobber as a passive system while you're targeting the other ones, and set it with a really easy, finesse presentation. A small jig head with a crawler on it, small jig head with a leech on it, or a plain octopus hook with a crawler or a leech on it, either way. So we're going to go into how we get these tied, how we set them, and then we're also going to cover something that can get a little bit finicky. It's super simple, but it's not exactly the most intuitive out there, and that's how we attach our bobber stops onto the line to give us that dynamic ability to change where we're using these floats at as we go through it. We'll get a chance to take a look at how some of the systems are tied up, and for example, when I was out chasing walleyes the other day there, yes, it's the same weekend where I killed my batteries running my trolling motor for too long. Got stuck out there. I'm sure you guys saw that short. If not, pay attention. I'll link it down here. You can have a chance to laugh at me for being an idiot. I was sure laughing at myself, so enjoy. Into that more of a dynamic presentation here when we're talking about being set up with a slip bobber rig. We get into this kind of a scenario where still, I've got some kind of a weight to get me down there and stay kind of where I want to be, and then I'm also then relying on my simple octopus hook. But now this bobber can change and go to where I need it to go to target the fish at the depths that I want to be at. Another one that I like to keep on the line is a simple jig presentation. This is just a small, it's a 1/4 ounce jig with a worm or plastic keeper on it. Still set up the same. Conditions were a little windy, so I did throw a couple extra split shots on there just as a means of getting this down faster to where I was going, but still that bobber was able to slide around on the line to where I need it. I do run fluoro for that main area where that bait presentation is going to be down, so it stays clear down in the water and less stuff here to see for the fish to be finicky on. And then I'm backing it up on my rods with 8, 10, whatever braid that you can get your hands on, and just joining it with a braid knot up there. That knot works really well as a joiner knot between the fluoro and the braid, so that even as this is getting cast out, that slip bobber still can move freely over that joiner and it doesn't become an issue, so that we can adjust that bobber stop to wherever we need it for the depth that we're seeing our fish and trying to get down to. So let's get into how we tie them. Stick with me. All right, so let's get into how we tie one of these on. A couple things. I'm going to be setting up my Fluger rod, and then we're going to tie a joiner knot for that braid and that fluoro. Alright, let's talk about our joiner knot. We need to get this braid joined with this fluoro. So to do that, the way I like is to make a loop, bring that tag end back towards the rod, and you're going to fish this line through, bring your fluorocarbon through, and then you're going to hold this loop on this side and then keep this fluoro up in line with it, and then you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, wraps around. Then you're going to take that tag end from your fluorocarbon and you are going to go back through that open loop of the braid. Now you hold your tag end to your fluoro and the running end together, hold the tag end and the running end of the braid together, and just start to sink them down. Once you start to feel some resistance, it's going to be time to start thinking about getting that knot moist so that you don't burn it up. Alright, pull them down good and tight, and you're going to create a joiner knot that is super strong. Once your joiner knot's all set, it's real important to make sure that you cut your tag ends off real close to that joiner knot so that there's no resistance when that bobber goes to slide by, right? Cut it off nice and clean, and then give yourself a check. Take the bobber you're going to end up using, feed it on, and make sure that it can pass that knot, no problem. See, with this one, there's a restrictor here, and that's going to cause me some issues. So, switch to one of these other presets that's a little different. So the next thing we need to talk about is how do we get our bobber stop set up so that this bobber does what we need it to do. Alright, let's get that bobber stopper on there. So you're going to need to take your fluoro, feed it through one of those open loops in your bobber stop. Alright, then you are going to take that bobber stop and just pull it off that wire right onto your line. And now that's going to give you a loop here with a running end back and a tag end again. Figure out which one's which, and then you are going to pull that tag end back out of your bobber stop. Now, for me, when I'm dealing with it on fluoro, with the wire ones, which I do prefer, they're a little easier to slide around than trying to retie a new felt knot on, but it makes a little kink, and I'm not a fan of having that down in my system where I'm going to be relying on this for fish. So I'll go right to where that kink was and eliminate it. Next thing that's going to need to go on is your bobber. Slide your bobber on your line, bring it through, and then move your bobber stop up enough so that you still have room to work down here. And now you got a couple options. If you want, you can tie a snap on, make things easier to change. It makes it faster switching out between, say, an octopus hook or a jig, but it also adds extra stuff down there for the fish to see. I'm not necessarily a fan. So for me, I'm just going to tie the hook straight on. And if you watch that knot tying video, you know this one, simple. 1, 2, 3. Bring it around and through. Moisten. And set your knot. And again, clean that tag end off real close down there. And now we're set. And that's pretty much about all there is to it, except this is not going to get down there very well, especially if you're throwing some thicker, more buoyant plastics. So for me, I'm going to throw a couple split shots on. This is a great little kit. It's got all sorts of different sizes. It was cheap. It was like $9 off of Amazon. If I want to keep it as simple as I can, I'm going to go for the heaviest split shot, and I'm going to set that up the line probably a foot or two away from my bait, and then just give it a little love with the pliers so it stays put. And now you've got a super simple dynamic setup with your bobber, and it will go to whatever depth you set that stopper at, and your bobber will just stop. Oh, great, cool. I'm hitting some of those weed-bound walleyes, some of the bass that are in some of that thicker cabbage. Great, hitting panfish with this. If we get out into that deeper water, we find some of those walleyes hanging out over structure down in the humps and stuff. Then I can just take that bobber stop, move it on up, and you will hit a little resistance when you get to your stopper knot. Just pull through, and you'll find that these bobber stops will go over your joiner. Alright, one thing to keep in mind is some of these rubber stopper knots are going to be very tight in how they try to go over your fluoro to braid joiner knot. So if that's the case, don't spend a lot of time breaking it, you know, getting mad like I just did 5 times. But just switch up. Take this, put the bobber stop on your braid. Your fluoro is only going to be probably 3 to 6 feet long anyway. It's going to work for most of the applications you're going to be fishing in. Then once it's above that, like I said, you know, you can slide that bobber stop to wherever you need it, and you can change where that bobber is going to hit and stay in those different fishing situations depending on the depths that you're working in. One thing to keep in mind is each one of these sliding bobbers, they have a buoyancy calculation for them. This one doesn't have it printed on it, but it was on the packaging. You got to keep that in mind when you go to select what size weight you're going to put on this, and you don't want to put so much on there that the bobber obviously sinks before a fish ever loads on it, but you want to put enough on there that it is going to suspend and sit up at least decently high enough in the water so that as this is down there waiting for the fish to come by and do what fishies do, that you've got at least a decent amount of this bobber sitting up above the water. I like these fill bobbers. They've got bright fluorescent orange and yellow on them. They're easy to see even in windy conditions, low light conditions. They're great. Kalen's I know makes some. There's tons of options out there. Don't get hung up on which manufacturer, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you're interested in watching that world's easiest knot tying video, keep your eyes open. We'll get that posted for you down here in the corner. Do me a favor, make sure you smash that bell, smash that subscribe button. Every one of those helps keep the algorithm putting me in front of you guys. Yep, that's how we drop a rod. Anyway, I love you guys. I'm thankful for you. Remember, be kind, be honest, take care of each other out there.